Go. All right. Well, good morning and welcome to Conversations for Leading Whole. I'm Paya Sampa. Sorry about that. I am Paya Sample. I am the CEO and founder of Peak Leaders Collective, and we are so glad to have you here with us as we have a really important and really necessary conversation that's really impacting leaders today. But before we go any further, I want to give my co-host, my co-conversational person, Dr. Gabbadon, Andrea, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself before we get started.
Hello. If you are on the East Coast like me, it is good afternoon. But Dr. Andrea Terrero Gabbadon, I use she, her pronouns. I am the founder and principal consultant of ILM Consulting Group. So my work is around supporting organizations to have a support and effective workforce.
Yes, awesome. Well, we're so glad to have you with us. I'm here in the St. Louis area, the Midwest, and so it is morning still here for us. But we really created this space so that we can have an honest conversation and give you as leaders, as you're kind of logging in now, a chance to really understand it's okay to be human. We know and we support leaders in a variety of ways, but we know that leaders right now are navigating the weight of responsibility, decision fatigue on this real side of this real human side of leadership. And sometimes in leaderships, I really feel like it feels like you have to choose between, am I going to perform or do I have to choose my well-being or my wholeness? But we truly believe that it's possible to lead with both. It's possible to lead with wholeness and fullness, leading with strength, leading with wholeness, while also really taking care of your humanity. And so this topic around burnout, self-care, and leading from wholeness is especially urgent right now. Across every sector, but specifically, we do a lot of work in the education space. We know that leaders are holding too much, like the emotional, the mental, the relational weight of their teams and organizations. And when leaders experience this burnout, it doesn't just stick with the leader. It's one of these things that really ripples out and personally impacts not only how they show up, but the culture they are trying to create and sustain. And so this conversation is an invitation. It's not about perfection. It's an invitation and giving you permission to notice, to slow down, and to be able to lead in a different way. So let's just jump right in. Andrea, I would love for you to share with us as you think about the phrase of leading whole. What does that actually mean for you right now?
Yeah, I think you said it well before, right? But this idea of leading whole causes me to think about leading with our humanity. Leading is human, right? And so what does that mean? To be human in this point in time means to lead with victory. It means to lead with grief. It means to lead in light of high expectations, right? And to do real work that touches lives in very real ways, right? But to do that, right, we know we have to lead with our whole selves.
Yeah.
And I can't honor the human in front of me if I don't acknowledge my own humanity, right?
Yes.
So wondering, like, how does this show up for you, this idea of leading whole? What does it mean for you right now?
Yeah, I mean, what you named, and even to go a little bit deeper, I think about leading whole for me personally is really deeply connected to my faith. It's really means like leading from a place of being grounded and knowing this has been kind of I say noob, and I feel like I should have already known this, but that's okay. We're all, growing and learning. But truly knowing that my worth is not tied to the outcomes, it's not tied to productivity, it's not tied to someone else's approval of me. It's about being really anchored in my purpose and my grace, even when things feel uncertain, even when things feel hard and challenging. And just like you said, like when I am able to lead from that space, like this full awareness of who I am and my limitations and my strengths and all of these pieces, I can create that same space for others to be human and really kind of honoring that humanity in what we do. And so I think that is what is needed in every space, if I'm being honest. But specifically as I think about leaders, because they have an opportunity to really model what that looks like and show that it's okay. And we want to see the same from others around us. So
Yeah,
that's what really
exactly.
kind of stands out to me as I think about wholeness and what's necessary and needed right now. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly. And so, we're here to talk about burnout,
Yes.
my friend. And so talk
Yeah.
to us.
Yeah.
I think it's really important that we have shared language so we know
Hmm.
what we mean when we're talking about these types of constructs. So what have you
Yes.
learned, and break it down
Yes.
for us?
Yes. Yes. And so, if you Google burnout at this point, you will get probably 400 different definitions of what it means. But one of the things that in our conversation, even prior to our conversation, just my own learning and my own growth, really seeing that the World Health Organization actually has a definition that I think is one that folks should really be grasping more firmly to, and breaks down that burnout is kind of made up of these three components. For one, it's one thing that just it takes place in an occupational or workspace environment. But it's made up of these three things. So one, feeling this like feeling of energy depletion. It's the physical, the emotional, and even the psychological exhaustion of the lack of energy in those spaces. It also is this increased distance that we begin to have from our job. Kind of like the way I kind of describe that is like we're present and we're in it, but we're not fully embodying the work anymore. It can be filled with feelings of negativity, and cynicism within someone's job, even like your attitude and your spirit towards your colleagues, or your clients and community members. And then the third piece is a reduced professional efficacy. Like we start to see ourselves as like, actually, I don't know if I can do this. I'm not able to really do this work in a successful manner. And so, as I really began to understand that term around burnout, for one, I feel like for the first time I really looked at it and understood it for what it was almost this sigh of relief for myself, in the sense of I didn't know I experienced burnout. I thought it was like something wrong with just me, that I was the only one that experienced this when I was in my previous leadership role as a principal. And so being able to have the language around what was taking place, that, oh, wait, no, this feeling that I was having of like, I don't think I'm good at this anymore. I don't know if I'm the most effective. Like, I thought it was like, I got to try harder, get back in with my counselor. I got to do this, career development work, and not actually seeing that, no, this was something that was outside of my control at this point. um, these specific emotion or these specific experiences. And so that just really helps, again, I think, to have some common language. And when we're talking about burnout, it's not just you're tired. It's not just, what, I just need to take a day off and I'm going to come back and I'm back at it. No, it's this constant state of those three items that I named. Yeah.
That's absolutely fascinating, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because what I hear you saying in this idea of energy depletion or
Mm-hmm.
mental distance or cynicism, burnout is not just physical, but what I
Mm-hmm.
hear is that there are very real emotional
Yes.
effects, there are very
Mm-hmm.
real spiritual effects, there's social, right? Thinking about your
Mm-hmm.
relationships at your job. But this idea of reduced professional efficacy also hits home. Because when we think about why should leaders care about burnout, it's
Mm-hmm.
because if you are burned out, if you are exhibiting those signs, you're not the only one impacted.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're truly service oriented, it's around how am I making decisions to mitigate burnout for myself, for those that I lead, so that we can
Mm-hmm.
just be good at what we do, so we can
Yeah.
serve well, right? Lead with our whole selves,
Yes.
and lead well, right?
For sure. For sure.
Certainly.
Yeah. And I think if I can add another piece, like I
Please
think
do.
as we kind of unpack burnout, another element, and even in our conversations leading up to this, is really understanding that like my burnout, or what burnout looks like on the external, but also interior, is very different. It will look very different than yours and even my colleagues, right? And so oftentimes, I even remember when I was in that role and at work, other leaders that I was connected with, and I'm like, but they seem like they're managing it. They have these pieces and they're okay. Again, that was kind of adding to like, what's wrong with me? It's all me. But really seeing that, like, understanding who I am and my strengths, my weaknesses, what I bring to the table, my identity, and we're going to get into that. All of those pieces add to kind of this equation that makes up what burnout might look like for Paya versus what burnout might look like for Andrea. And so it's really important and critical in many ways for leaders to not get into a place of this comparison of like, if they are, then I should, or since I can, the folks who report to me should be able to, but really understanding what some of those internal and exterior, those external indicators really look like. Um, and I think I remember one of the first things that were kind of looked like for me, kind of um, what's the symptom, I guess, of what it is I noticed. So I'm a firm believer in mental health. I've had a counselor for most of my adult career, a therapist that I met with regularly, and for extended period of time, I was like, all right, we have our check-ins every quarter, and then it maybe moved into every semester or so like that. But one of the things I started noticing is I started having more meetings with my therapist. It was like I was like, okay, yeah, I'm struggling even more, so I just need to talk to her again so she can give me some other things that I can do. And okay, wait a minute. Okay, I think I'm having maybe a panic attack. Let me go in and talk with my therapist. And just this like for me, it was this like knew something was wrong and thinking I had to do it. So I go to my therapist and she would talk through it, and she was finally the one to say to me like, these things are out of your control. Like I'm so thankful that you're coming to this space so we can talk through it. But there are many pieces that you are trying to fix that are actually not yours. And so all of that to say, like understanding that burnout for me will look very different for someone else. I think that's important.
Certainly. I love this, the language or the word of equation,
Hmm.
right? Because burnout, again, you shared a really hefty definition, but I think at its core, what I would encourage listeners, and particularly those listeners who are leaders, to walk away with is that we can understand burnout as an equation, right? It
Hmm.
is when the demands of your role exceed the amount of resources available,
Hmm.
right? And so burnout is an equation.
Yeah.
Think about scales, right? Demand, resources.
Hmm.
There's a second piece that you said, Paya, that's really, really powerful around like your individual kind of ownership over your
Hmm.
self care, right?
Yeah.
And I think back to what I've learned as a leader, in leading organizations, in leading schools, in leading um, entire classrooms, right, at the undergraduate and graduate level, right? When I was in care of people and I took care of people, and that was a
Hmm.
large part of my job, I always thought and encouraged self care as, all right, you go do this. But I didn't think about it in terms of the ecosystem that I was creating, right?
Hmm.
So what I hear you saying, Paya, is I implemented self care. I took
Hmm.
the individual decision. I took the steps. I did the strategy to make, to really take care of my mental health or my
Hmm.
psychological well being. But what the second thing, right, if we want leaders to walk away from this conversation better, is this idea of what is the ecosystem that you are
Hmm.
cultivating?
Yes.
Is it one that amplifies and elevates this idea of high demand with not
Hmm.
enough resources? Because if that
Hmm.
is the case, if the resources and supports are not available, you can be the kindest, most well intentioned leader of an organization, and you will at the same time burn your folks out.
Hmm. Yes.
And so we cannot, I love wearing jeans, don't get me wrong, but a jeans Friday, right?
Yes. Yes.
Sneakers on, Tuesday afternoon, it's going to make, my feet feel a little bit better, but that is not going to mitigate an
Mm.
ecosystem of toxicity
Yes.
on the back of workers, right, in ways that is only compounding stress. And so
Mm.
um, let's talk about, and I would love to get your thoughts around this, but I feel like we need to talk about self-care and wellness, right?
Yes. Yes.
Now, I got to ask you, do you get your nails done? Are you like
I
manicure, pedicure
don't.
type person?
Nope, I'm not at all.
No.
No. I mean, I'll
Okay.
take my daughters. So they're now of the age of like, oh, can we go? And I'm like, that's expensive. Just here's some nail polish, just paint them. And no, so I am not. That is not. That is
Okay.
not.
So maybe I'm alone, right? Maybe there's a
Okay.
listener who's at, but I used to think, look, I got my nails done. That's my self-care,
uh,
right? That is
uh,
my moment to disassociate from my
yes.
reality. But what I'm coming to understand, and what the research supports as well, is that self-care is about decision making.
Mm.
And it's around decision making really in 7 key areas. And so what I
Mm.
would encourage us to do is to maybe move away from this idea of self-care, and for
Hmm.
leaders to use the language of wellness,
Yes.
right? I think about
Yeah.
the Maasai greeting, right? Are the children well?
Mm.
I mean, that's a separate, we got to have a
Yes,
conversation about the children
there's
are
another
well.
one of those. Yes.
But we also have to ask, are the
Uh-huh.
people under my leadership well?
Yeah.
And we need to define wellness, right, as are they well emotionally, right?
Hmm.
Financially, socially, spiritually, right? Intellectually, right? Are we giving them intellectual nuggets, cognitive nuggets to grow them
Hmm.
as particularly if we're in education or in healthcare, right, to grow as professionals, but then also, that recreational and physical well-being as well. And so, again, I think here the call is for leaders. Yes, it's around individual responsibility and decision making. Yes, and like we are autonomous agents as human
Hmm.
beings. But in what ways am I cultivating an organizational culture that is really fostering wellness, right? Moments
Hmm.
of spiritual calm, mindfulness. How am I, again, providing professional development in ways that stimulates folks
Yeah.
intellectually? Even moments of, physical wellness, right? Like
Yeah.
encourage folks to have walking meetings. Like
Hmm.
we sit down way too much, right? And so
Absolutely. Yeah.
expanding our definition and understanding of wellness in that way.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you named those specific pieces because I do think people. So I'm not a nail person, but the massages are my thing, right? So it's like, oh, bring in them, go get a massage. Like those things are great and they do help in that moment. But we're looking and we're talking about these things that sustain wellness over time. And I think it's also important as you think about those areas that you identify, the emotional, financial, intellectual, spiritual, all of those pieces. I would encourage listeners and leaders to think about it's okay when there's not an equal balance. I think we use this term like work life balance. I was actually working with the team yesterday and they're like, that's one of our core values, work life balance. And I was like, is it realistic that we're going to always be in balance? I don't believe it is. And that's okay. And like, is it okay for us to give ourselves permission to say, all right, when I'm thinking about what I need intellectually, right now it is more. I need more of that than maybe I need on the physical side. Like I'm doing great on the physical side. The thing that the bucket or the tank that's empty is this. And so I need to be able to fill that part of my wellness. And so I don't want anyone thinking like, all right, these 7 buckets or, these areas, like now you have to equally pour into them at all times of the day. No, no, no. Like it ebbs and flow. The seasons and the times that we're in, like we might need different things. Like with the time change happening right now, like I'm noticing that I need more of the physical because the darkness is impacting me. And so, what does it look like for me individually? But also, when I think about, like you said, working in an organization or in an institution, creating spaces for the other folks that I am privileged to care for, giving them space to kind of take care of those buckets as well. So I think that's super important. And so I actually want to ask you to talk a little bit about what you're seeing with either, like currently, but also like as we were getting started, we were both Andrea and I were just saying, wow, it's been 2 years since we've connected, and so it's amazing that it's already been 2 years, and like it's really been 2 years. But I would love for you to talk a little bit about when you think about the struggle, the burnout, the challenges of that, and also this challenge of like how are we integrating and making sure we're incorporating wellness into what we're doing. But what are you seeing with the ideas and topics around burnout with the folks that you work with, the people you come alongside and support, maybe even specifically like leaders? And so, what are you noticing and what they're experiencing with burnout? And also, like, what are some of the things that you're doing to help kind of support and counter some of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And when I think about the last 2 years, right, so much has transpired.
Mm.
It feels like the world was flipped upside down and then flipped
And
over
then flipped
again, and
again.
then
Yes.
and so I think what's important is maybe to go back, right, to how we first met, how we
Hmm.
first kind of our paths first crossed, and it was
Hmm.
around my book,
Hmm.
which of course have a copy here.
Yes. And if you
Support.
don't, time out.
Go ahead,
If
go
you
ahead.
don't have a copy, like this is your call to get one because that truly, like that book has just shifted and just supported so much great work that I've been able to do. And it's been a gift that I've been able to give to many leaders that I've been able to coach and walk with. So if you don't have the book, you're missing out. So purchase a book. back to you. Sorry.
No, I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. But, I wrote the book, Support and Retain Educators of Color, because at the time in which I was doing the national study that informed the book, we were undergoing a global pandemic, right, which radically changed our society as we know it. And all of the economic and political and social factors that were happening in the United States in particular really impacted teachers, particularly teachers of color, right? And I wrote the book in response to what they said. Help us by responding and addressing to the things that are compounding our workplace stress and pushing us out. And so fast forward 2 years, what I'm seeing in my work is this idea of resource scarcity, economic, social, and political pivots that are impacting the work of educators and those who are in social service sectors in ways that is heightening workplace stress. So let's go back to the equation, right? What is burnout? It is when the demands of your work outweighs, right, the available resources and support. And so in my work with leaders, I'm seeing leaders who are struggling with, how do I serve the needs of the community with less resources, with less personnel, with everyday threats to our humanity, to people's livelihood, to the point that some of our babies are wondering, where's the next meal going to come from? And we have to acknowledge that stress is also sitting with our educators and our leaders. And so the thing that I kind of want to close this with, in terms of what am I noticing, is that those who are in the abundance of a heart that is full of love and service to communities are being asked to do more and more with less. And I am afraid in this current moment that if we are not addressing the core issues underlying burnout, that we will see push out, that we will see mass attrition, not just of educators, not just of nurses, not just of social workers, but those who are over entire organizations, schools, districts. And that is going to have sizable impacts on everyone.
Yes.
And so it's about leaders understanding the ecosystem that they're in, acknowledging what is the self-work that needs to occur, and how do I need to lead in this moment where demand is so high, and be innovative, right? And that's where my approach is: creating resources, coaching, mentoring, masterminds, right? Around how we help each other be innovative so we can continue to do more with less and less.
Yes, yes. I love what you said about the like ways and walking along with them is that innovation, right? And we know, like research shows, I've said this anytime I talk, I'm not a brain expert, but I'm a brain nerd, and I like to nerd out on like what is happening in our brain. But we know that innovation can't happen when there is not a sense of belonging and connection, and when trust is non-existent. Right. And so oftentimes, and I think about most of the leaders that I coach are women of color in leadership roles. Right. And so oftentimes they have shared with me and communicated with me that they are in spaces where, one, they don't even always feel like they are connected and belong, because they're one of very few or one of the only in these spaces. Right. And so even understanding that, or even feeling comfortable enough to say that burn out, which turns into we get burned up. But burnout really, they don't often feel like they have permission to name it, because they don't even feel like they've always had a sense of belonging and that they're a part of it, if that makes any sense. And so one of the things when I'm thinking about this, that innovation piece is what's coming to me. One of the pieces that I get to do, and I didn't set out to do this work. It truly, I truly feel like it's like the Lord's calling, and the work that He has done on the work and the gifts that He's given me, is so much of my coaching with these women and one-on-one coaching is really addressing that third point of the burnout, the professional efficacy. of they come to me and they're burnt out, or they're really like, I think I need a career shift. I think I'm done with this. But so much of it is about like creating space to help them see, like, actually, like, you're a genius, you're brilliant, you have so much that you bring to the table. Right now you're in an environment or in a system that doesn't see that. But how can, even in this space, we create opportunities for you to remember that, remember your brilliance, remember your strengths, remember the things that you are bringing to the table, so that we can move toward innovation. Because that's what I started seeing happening in those coaching sessions, that they might start as like, I'm exhausted, I'm tapped out, but they've slowly begin to shift into like, all right, so here's this idea I have, can you help me like unpack this idea and how to bring it to my team. So really having a space to say, like, a resource now available to meet one of the demands of this exhaustion or isolation that they're experiencing, that can create connection, where trust can begin to be reestablished, and for them to be able to use and tap into their strengths, to problem solve, to think creatively, to be able to um, think 3 steps ahead, rather than having to be reactive. And so I feel like those types of spaces are necessary and needed, because if not, just, back to your point, I think we're going to continue to see that, the mass exodus that's already taking place. Like, I think, here in just in the St. Louis area, the number of superintendents, you talk about like the, not just the teachers, like it is hitting the leaders of organizations, but in a school space, a number of superintendents in the area that have either resigned or left, or, all those different pieces. I'm shocked. And I'm also, what you said, like, terrified, and thinking of like the ramifications of this role, this ripple effect, if we don't address it now.
Yeah.
Um,
So can I jump in? Because I really want to,
yeah.
one, give some shout outs, right? I see Rashida dropped a comment. Hey, Rashida, thanks for tuning in. I love this idea of achieving harmony, right? Because,
Mm.
and I think, right, Hey, you're alluding to this as well, this idea of, when I think of harmony, I think of like
Mm.
music and
Mm.
notes, right? That play particular melodies, right?
Yeah.
But the ways in which sound and music are
Mm.
enhanced when certain progressions and combinations are happening in tandem, right? And so there's this
Mm-hmm.
idea that, um, yes, there's individual work that needs to be done, but that work can't be done in isolation, right? Or divorced
Right.
from others. And then shout out to Rick. Yes, Rick, grab the book,
Yes,
certainly.
get it.
But let me ask you this question, right?
Yeah.
So when is a leader is listening to us,
Mm-hmm.
and they're saying, "Wait, I'm noticing that the demands of my work is outweighed greatly by the resources and support available." What is one
Mm.
thing, or the first thing that they should be doing for themselves and or their team? What do you think?
Yeah, yeah. I think first off, the fact that they noticed it and are aware, that's huge. I think, awareness is an area that I don't think we spend enough time realizing how necessary and significant it is. And so I think being able um, to see it and name it for what it is huge. To actually be able to say, wait a minute, there's something going on here. Here's all the pieces I'm being asked to do, but the resources meaning financial resources, thinking about the professional resources, whether it's like access to certain things. Time is a resource. Like, if I'm being asked to do all of this and yet nothing is being taken off my plate, first and first and foremost, naming that that's a problem, right? And so I think that's the first thing that we can do as leaders, is see that it is a problem, name it. So many times I hear this, like, name it to tame it. We got to name it so we know what it is that we're addressing, right? And then looking at that piece, I think it's really important, to then move into, okay, what is in my control, as well as like, what are the things that I can influence, and that, doing that work, being able to do that on their own, or even with the thought partner of like, okay, what parts of my calendar are within my control, what are the pieces that are not, and then how do I make sure I'm focusing on the things that I have full control over. And so, a lot of times I think it starts with like creating boundaries, creating space to almost like, I call it gray space. That's what I put on my calendar. Like, space to just like be for a moment. Not to work, not to do, just maybe just sit and be quiet for a second, to be present with whatever it is that I'm experiencing. And so, like, I think looking at our calendars, so many folks they say live and die by our calendar. Well, let's start there. Let's start putting some like physical space on that calendar, what you can control, and then thinking about what else do we need to add to it? Whether it is like getting a therapist, finding outside help to like really start to name some of the things that are happening internally. It could be like, all right, I know that I'm not physically getting what I need. And what does it look like to put walks on your calendar? That was one of when I was a building principal. Um, and I'm so thankful when I finally realized it and then start putting it on the calendar and had like folks who were holding me accountable to it, where I would literally just put 10 minutes where I would go out the back door because sometimes I didn't want people to know I was leaving. The two people that knew that I was leaving, they can manage things while I'm gone. And it was truly just like get outside, walk the neighborhood for 10 minutes. Because for me, finding my ground, finding my peace comes with being in nature, as much nature as possible. Just being quiet, head to the sun. Sometimes I take my socks and shoes off and feet to the earth to physically just ground myself to get present in my body. Because I think so many times, look, for me, like again, not knowing that it was burnout at the time, but now, like I felt like I was floating. That was the way I would describe it. Felt like I was floating in and out of spaces, but never really in my body, if that makes any sense. And so those were like practices that I would do to really kind of ground myself and get present in the moment to try and bring clarity to figure out what I need to do next. But yeah, those are some things that I would recommend as leaders. Like first identifying and naming it, putting space in what you can control, and then identifying what you need um, to get recentered or help you to see what matters most. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
go, you go.
yeah,
I
yeah,
was
no,
gonna
it's
ask for
just
you, but go
because I'm seeing an overlap, or rather an alignment. Oh, and
ahead.
thanks, Rick, for tuning in. I hope
Yes,
you have a
thank you.
great class. Um, I'm seeing an alignment between these recommendations that you're sharing now and this um, list, right, that we shared earlier around the 7 types of wellness, right? Going
Mm-hmm.
back to the emotional, the physical,
Yes.
the spiritual, right? And so what I see you saying is like, once I named it, I addressed, right, that element of my spiritual well-being, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or I addressed that element of my emotional well-being, or maybe it was
Mm-hmm.
my physical well-being by taking the walk, right? Emily said that she's going to start putting time on her calendar. Emily, I need to do the same. I was I was also a little bit
You're taking
convicted.
notes too.
But it's that idea of being able to name, like, what are the specific things that
Mm-hmm.
give me life, that will
Yes.
replenish me, right? And so
Yeah.
for me, like, you said you're a brain nerd, right? Like, I
Mm-hmm.
feel that. I feel like that is why we connected, because I am also a nerd. Like, I want to read all day long. Like, if I could just read and write, I would be the happiest person. There would be like only milk in the fridge, probably, but
Because you'd
like,
be broke, but that's okay. You'd be happy.
I would, because that element of my spirit would be
Yeah.
fulfilled, because I would be exposed to new ideas. And so this idea of like, what is, all right, I'm feeling that something is off. What is the thing? Which of these
Mm-hmm.
7 categories do I need to
Yeah.
pay attention to? Going back to Rashida, so that it's
Yeah.
this idea of I can have harmony,
Mm-hmm.
right? I can have that
Yeah.
harmony, because I put on my calendar those social engagements. I have my
Yeah.
girlfriends, we hang out. That is a religious ritual
Mm-hmm.
for me.
Mm-hmm.
But the intellectual wellness, right? The emotional,
Yeah.
those are areas that even now I'm thinking, wow, what is that lever I need to pull? One
Mm-hmm.
thing I also want to kind of pull out, because this is absolutely important for us to consider in this conversation, is that burnout is different from stress, right? So
Yes.
stress can be good for us, right? It can cause us to perform well. It can increase
Mm-hmm.
our capacity, our resilience, right? Our creativity. But what we're talking about here, right, are these sustained patterns where we are
Mm-hmm.
glorifying, right, this idea of being under resourced and pushing ourselves in ways that are inhumane, right? That are
Yes.
conflict
Yes.
and undercut those 7 areas in ways that, going back to what Taya shared earlier, it's that cynicism, it's the
Yes.
lack of productivity. And so we're not talking about stress here, folks,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so let's be clear. But
Yes.
again, the ecosystem that we need to redesign in order to really name, hey
Mm-hmm.
folks, we lost funding. We got to think
Mm-hmm.
about things differently. We know this is going to impact us. And so then that needs us, or that requires us rather, to think about not just the practice of creating a community or organizational culture
Yes.
that fosters wellness, but what are the policies, right? Because
Yes.
it's not just a practice thing, right? It's a
Yes.
policy
Absolutely.
thing as well. Maybe we should transition
Yeah.
there. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah, I definitely think so, and I think, like, I wanna hear your thoughts on this. You named something that I think I'm seeing, the glorifying, the, like, the overstress, the overwork, even, like, I was with the team earlier this week, and I was like, "Yeah, so, we give give shout outs for folks when they, so and so pulled an all-nighter and got this thing done, woohoo," and I'm like, "Wait a minute. No, 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 like, why are we glorifying those things or giving raises to those people?" And so yeah, I just knowing that you kind of work in a variety of spaces with educators, with leaders, and even in the higher education spaces. Can you even share, like, maybe not by name organizations, but organizations or spaces that are doing
Mhm.
and making those policy shifts, and kind of what you're noticing they're kind of taking into consideration, and if it might be too early to see the impact that they're noticing as they're putting those pieces into place. Again, if it's something we value, it has to show up in our processes, our policies, and our systems as well.
Mhm. Yeah, that is such an important that's such an important question, right? And I
Mm,
think what it all starts with, and I talk about this in my book, and I'm going to die on this hill, but this idea of creating an organizational culture that cultivates thriving and wellness,
mhm.
it starts with what we believe,
Yes.
right? It starts with what we believe about ourselves and about others, about our shared humanity, about our shared dignity, around what it is that we deserve, right, as human beings. And we deserve space to breathe, to
Mm,
live. And what we often see, particularly in education and the healthcare sector, is this almost rejection of our humanity, right?
yes.
We're all about the kids, but at the
Yeah.
same time, we are amplifying kind of this capitalist culture of you are the outcomes, you have to produce, you produce at all costs, and it's
Mhm.
just about, again, the outcomes that you are able to generate,
Yes.
right? And we're, again, this goes back to this idea of we're being asked to do more and more and more with less.
Yeah.
And sometimes we can't help it. But again, in what ways are we naming it to tame it and then
Mhm.
kind of leaning into innovation? And so, in thinking about policy, again, policy starts with what we believe about ourselves and with
Mhm.
others. And so, I would encourage anyone who's developing a program, who is creating organizational policy that is fueling a district or some other large scale institution. What are ways that you are centering your own humanity and the humanity of others in your policy, right?
Mhm.
In what ways, if you are understanding that there is a decrease in resources, how are you therefore building people's capacity? And that
Mhm.
is what you're leaning into versus kind of, all right, folks, well, we got to tighten up our belts. We brought in less funding. And so now you're going to have to do the work of two people because we're not going to
Mm.
backfill these open roles, right?
Mhm.
And so, what does this mean? These are best policy undergirds best practices in retaining staff. It's
Yes.
around having policy that amplifies agency, right? That amplifies autonomy and choice, that is building, again, people's professional capacity, that is teaching them to do their work better and at a higher level in a way that is responsive to who they are as professionals. And then
Mhm.
also, when we talk about this work-life balance, right, we can't send mixed messages. You can't
Mhm.
have deadlines, in ways that, forces people to work, overtime, or
Right.
you're emailing people at all hours of the night, but you're saying, you can close your computers at 5. Like, we
Mhm.
have to think about, again, in what ways is all that we are putting out there into our
Mhm.
organization and our leadership really undergirded by this idea of this work has to be sustainable. And how
Mhm.
am I making it sustainable? How is each decision allowing or advancing this idea of sustainability, or how is it detracting from that? And I think
Mhm.
if folks have that orientation, then we might see a radical shift in how
Yeah.
we're doing work and how we are performing this thing called leadership.
Yes. No, I love those two questions that you named. Can you say those one more time? I want to make sure if you can remember the last two, you can. That's okay. If you can't, like the questions, almost like as I'm putting this policy or this practice in place, is this helping to kind of take away
Ad-
from, or do I want you to say it?
yeah, advance, right? Sustainability. Or is it taking away, right? Is it
Yeah.
eroding this idea of making the work sustainable? And I think,
Yeah.
some people are like, well, I don't have more money for PD. I don't have more money for, but you know what? Put smart people in a room to
Hmm.
figure out the hard
Yeah.
problems,
Yes.
right? Think about what is absolutely necessary in this work instead of layering on additional meetings, additional
Hmm.
tasks. We say this all the time, and I'm moving away from it. This language of centering employee voice, we got to start from there, right? We
Mm.
have to start from there. And so, if you're not sure, how do you make the work more sustainable and add to the capacity, particularly of your best folks? My
Hmm.
wondering is like, did you ask them?
Hmm.
And did you
Yeah.
cultivate a space where they are
Were they?
freed up to listen, or
Yes.
rather to share,
Yes.
because they know that you're listening and you're going to respond,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah, I love that. I love those questions, and like as leaders are listening, many of you probably are in the midst of creating or developing and thinking about, like, I think those two questions can help just to begin to think about, how do I take this idea around wellness and sustainability and wanting to retain good folks. Gives you one small way to start thinking about how I can, take what you've learned here and thinking about it in a new way. The question that I like, I got stars pointed to it, is like the what do we feel and believe that we deserve? Like I
Mm.
think in leadership there is so much, there's still so much work to be done about what leadership is, what is good leadership, what's healthy leadership. And I think oftentimes folks get into these spaces and kind of all the way back to the beginning of our conversation, not seeing themselves even as human beings who deserve XYZ, you named it, and then begin to lead in that way. Because if I don't deserve it, then for sure the folks that am I have the privilege of leading. They might even see it as a privilege of leading. They don't deserve it because I don't even need this and I can do these things. And so that's I think a really powerful question of, like, for leaders to think about, what do you believe you deserve? And if it's not that you believe that you deserve wellness, why not? Who told you that?
Mm.
Who put that narrative in your head? And
Mhm.
I think spending some time to really deconstruct, is that your narrative, or is that the voice of someone else, right? And so I think many times you get into leadership, it's not what we it's not always our voices in our head. It's the voice of someone else or another leader we saw, and we're trying to conform ourselves to fit. And I think it's really important for us to say, well, what's the legacy that I want to leave in my leadership? And I hope for more and more people, it's this, like, leading from a place of humanity, where I see and
Mhm.
honor your dignity, and I also see and honor mine. I want to create space where you can take care of those those um, those seven
Mhm.
areas of wellness.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
oh
no, I just like it's there's an invitation
yeah,
there, right? It's
yeah,
an invitation to return back, right, to our
hmm,
humanity. And
yeah,
so even as I'm listening to you, it's there I hear an invitation around, even to myself, around like, you know, I thrive on spaces of gratitude. It's spaces
mm,
where, my agency, there's space for my agency, there's space for my autonomy, where there are clear priorities, right?
hmm,
And so when I think about what I need, what allows me to flourish, it's like, in what ways am I creating the ecosystem in which that is
yeah,
present for others,
yes,
right? And I would say, as leaders, we need to take top responsibility, not just for taking care of ourselves and addressing the things that we need to address to mitigate our own burnout, but we need to be tenacious in how we are protecting and
hmm,
honoring the time and the well-being of others. And
yeah,
so thinking
yeah,
about, even just more like, I'm thinking about, how can I encourage the leaders that I have to think about how they're protecting folks' calendars, how
yeah,
they can protect folks' time. And even thinking about Trisha Hershey, right? She encourages, like you said, the gray space, like
hmm,
reserve time to be creative, look out the window and
hmm,
daydream. In what
yes,
ways am I incorporating that into my training of leaders to
Mm-hmm.
model, this is what it
Yeah.
looks like to get done,
Yes.
to
Yeah.
produce outcomes, but also to hold space for,
Yeah.
again, creativity, for rest, for emotional and spiritual wellness, right? What
Yeah.
would it look like if we just move beyond those? And no shade to those who do it, but like,
Right.
what'd you
I
do
know.
this weekend? Icebreakers to like a moment of silence
Yeah.
to regulate ourselves.
Yeah. Yes.
What would
Yes.
that do? What would that do?
Yes. Just those moments. Yeah. It even makes me think when you're thinking about for leaders to encourage and invite, the folks on their team to implement some of those strategies as well. I think it also starts when I think about for leaders or managers, folks who have individuals that report to them. Um, Part of our work also as leaders is to assess. So, in order to protect their well being, we also have to know and assess kind of where they are and understanding their workload, right? And so that doesn't require, I don't think it always requires a ton of time that people think. It can be small check-ins. What is a key priority for you right now as you think about this upcoming quarter? What resources and support do you need? Do you have access to those? What are the pieces that are getting in the way? And so just creating these rhythms where leaders, again, in order to understand someone else's humanity, you have to know them as people, not just their roles and their titles. And so being able to assess kind of what their workload is means that you have to have conversations with them to determine, oh, let's take this off your plate. Actually, this shouldn't be yours. It's not yours. Like, how do we remove those things? Again, so that you can really help spaces and create spaces as we think about wellness for those folks.
I
And
love that.
so, yeah. So as we kind of wrap up our conversation, I want to give you a chance, Andrea, as you think about leaders who are listening, either listening here live with us now or listening to the recording later. What is a piece of advice or even encouragement that you would give them as they think about, like, okay, this was great. What do I do next? Where do I start? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And I think for me, it goes back to that Messiah greeting, right?
Mm,
But of remixing a little bit, not asking about if the children are well, right? But this
mm-hmm.
idea of like, am I well, right?
Yeah.
Am I well? And doing that kind of internal work around our own capacity and the ways in which we are managing the demands, resources, and supports within our context.
Mm,
And similar to what you said earlier, we have to name it.
yeah.
And then I also think the second piece, and this is the core responsibility of a leader, is asking about the wellness or the
Mm,
well-being of those that we are serving, right?
mm-hmm.
And so what are those tough things that we need to ask ourselves to determine whether or not the work as we have created it within our systems is sustainable? And some of
Mm-hmm.
us will say, I'm a middle manager, right? In what ways do you then need to advocate, right?
Mm-hmm.
In ways that will then allow for the work to be sustainable for those that you're serving, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if not, then what's your next step? Whether it's advocacy, coalition building, whether it's providing mentorship, professional development, right? Like, again, thinking about innovation. And I'll add this as well. Who are the people who are going to help you think through that? And
Mm,
so for me, I'm a big fan of affinity groups, resource groups.
yeah.
There's power in harnessing our collective brilliance, particularly for folks of color and folks of other
Mm-hmm.
minoritized identities. And so we can find our spaces, whether they are virtual or in person, so that we can support one another to think differently and outside the box, again, with that purpose of
Mm,
rehumanizing the work,
yes.
right? Because if we don't rehumanize it, it will not be sustainable. And then we'll
Yes.
see mass attrition, as we've seen those patterns historically.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Any
I, th-
recommendations you would give?
I think the last one you were naming, the community piece, is one that I think really resonates with me, but also I think is needed and so necessary in leadership spaces. Um, Sometimes I think I think about leaders that I work with, don't even have the eyes or awareness to be able to see that they're in a really hard spot right now. And so I think I would say, like, first look up and look around and see, are you in community? Like, that would be my first thing, is like, are you a part of community? It doesn't necessarily have to be tied to the profession and the work that you do, but like, are you in community with other human beings who know you beyond your work? kind of the person behind. Um, Again, behind the position, I think that is necessary and required if we want to lead with wholeness. Like we have to be able to create space where people can see all of our wholeness, right? And so I think for leaders, that's my first encouragement or advice is like get in community some way, somehow, especially with so much virtual things now. Like there's so much at our fingertips, but you are not meant to lead alone. I think even though much of society says we are, I disagree. That part of society should be torn down and burned somewhere. But like we are not meant to carry the load on our own. We are not meant to know and have all the answers. You are not supposed to have all access to resources. Like that is why we again our brains are built and wired for connection. We want to be in community. So that would be my first thing is get in community. Ask people to tell you what they see in you, in your practice, in your behavior, in your activities, all those pieces. And then I would say like start small. Like this, you don't have to look at the wellness wheel and say, and here we go, all 7. No, you're gonna burn yourself out. I would truly say like after getting the feedback or hearing from folks when you're in community, then looking at maybe one of those areas that you're curious about, or you're like, oh yeah, I used to do this. That's a place to start. What does it look like to begin to, pick that up and do it again? And so I think that's what I would say to leaders, like get in community and find that one place that you used to have joy and excitement. And what does it look like to tap back into that? So
Yeah.
awesome. Well, as we wrap up, I just said that as we close, but now for real, as we close, Andrea, where I want to hear like first, where can people find you? I'm going to put your website up in a moment, but also tell us about some of the upcoming things you have coming up if people want to kind of tap into some of those spaces.
Yeah. So you can definitely reach out to me, atgabbadon.com. In terms of where I am next, I will be at the Black Men in Education convening in Philadelphia. I'll be in Chicago next month at the National Alliance for Black School Educators. And then come winter 2026, I'll be holding some webinars with my publisher, ASCD, as well as traveling. So definitely, stay tuned. If you're interested, you can sign up for my newsletter via my website. So you can be abreast of my speaking calendar. And if you're interested in working with me for the purpose of keynotes, coaching, program development, or support, again, check out my website. What about you, Paya? Where are you headed?
Awesome. Well, yeah. So I'm going to be here in St. Louis. I'm not heading anywhere yet, but I have an event coming up in just a month from today. I'm very excited about it. It is a connecting through community and stories event that I'm putting together with the people of color. It's a chapter here in the St. Louis area. So we're having a day of learning, a day of kind of bringing folks together, specifically geared, but not entirely exclusive to educators of color that work in the independent school spaces to come together and fellowship, to connect, to share stories, and also to learn with one another. And so that's here in the St. Louis area, December 5th. It's an all-day deal. You can come for the whole day. You can come for part of the day. But I'm very, very excited about it. Working with this group who really, we saw a need. We saw that there was a gap and we wanted to be able to fill it. And so I feel like I'm privileged and honored to be able to do that. So that's coming up in December. So that's kind of what my entire focus is on right now. Then have a few just speaking engagements here in the St. Louis space, working in education, school spaces, but also been branching out and doing some work in like public health and government sector as well. And so if there's anyone who is interested in like strategic planning, coaching, consulting, doing a lot of leadership teamwork. So thinking about not just leaders, but the team that they put together. Been fun and exciting to do that piece. So if anyone's interested, my website's there. You can find me on LinkedIn here or Instagram. So awesome. Well, this was a pleasure. This was a joy. I'm so thankful for you in so many ways. From that very first conversation when I sent the little chat, I was like, I'm just going to send her this. She probably won't respond. And I was like, whoa, she responded and we're talking and it's been great. But I just thank you so much for sharing your experience, sharing your story. And so if anyone is listening and kind of listened in on the conversation, if this resonated with you, we would love to hear from you. But also, is there another leader that you think needs this reminder? And if so, I would encourage you to send them this link and remind them that they don't have to carry it all alone. And so I thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, continue leading with wholeness. Take care.